Enzo Ferrari sat in his modest office in Modena, staring at a single black and white photograph on his desk. It showed one of his red prototypes caught mid-corner, body rolled, outside front tire screaming under load. Next to it, taped on with casual disrespect, was another photo. A cheap American coupe, fiberglass body, chrome bumpers, sitting in a paddock with folding lawn chairs and a cooler parked behind it. The handwritten note scrawled in Italian across the margin translated to one simple sentence. The $4,000 one is faster. He did not smile. To understand how a humble American sports car could rattle a man like Enzo Ferrari, you have to step back into the early 1960s, when speed was not just a number on a stopwatch. It was national pride, family honor, and for Enzo, a living monument to his lost son. In that world, Italian prototypes did not lose to American coupes. They certainly did not lose to something that cost less than a quarter of a wheelbase. Carefully crafted Maranello experiment. But that was before the 1963 Corvette Sting Ray. Picture this. It is a cool morning at a small Italian circuit in the early 1960s. Mist clings to the grass. Mechanics in dark blue overalls push low, purposeful Ferraris toward the pit lane, their engines crackling and snarling as they warm up. Each car is a sculpture of aluminum, beaten by hand over wooden bucks, lines honed by decades of racing experience and aesthetic obsession. The men around them move with quiet seriousness. They are not just preparing cars, they are preparing weapons. At the far end of the paddock, away from the polished transporters and the espresso cups, a different sound cuts through the murmur. A deeper, more American rumble. Heads turn. Rolling in on an open trailer behind a work truck is something that does not fit the scenery at all. A low, shark-like coupe with hidden headlights, a sharp crease along its flanks, and a split rear window. That looks like a spaceship crashed into a piece of American suburbia. The locals have seen pictures in magazines, but in person, the Chevrolet Corvette Sting Ray looks even stranger. It is not a delicate machine. It is bold, almost arrogant. The nose is long and pointed, the haunches tense, like a predator frozen mid-leap. Instead of hand-beaten aluminum, the body is fiberglass, a material the old world still treats as a novelty. To the Italian mechanics, it looks like a toy. To the man behind the wheel, an American privateer with grease under his fingernails and a borrowed fire suit, it is something else entirely. He shuts off the engine, and the Corvette rocks gently on its suspension, settling like a big cat lying down. Silence for a moment, then the laughter starts. One of the Ferrari men nudges his friend. "Look at that, plastic car." Another shakes his head. $4,000 in a dream. They glance at the red prototype sitting nearby. A long tail. Experimental machine built at vast expense. At that time, a serious Ferrari racing prototype could cost the equivalent of $20,000 or more once you counted the custom body, the 12-cylinder engine, the development time, the spare parts, and the endless hours of testing. That figure did not include the intangible cost of ego. To Enzo, who believed deeply that his cars were thoroughbreds and everything else was livestock, the idea that a cheap American fiberglass coupe could stand in the same pit lane as his creations was almost an insult. But racing has a cruel way of peeling off paint and pretense. On the stopwatch, all that matters is how quickly you get around the lap. And on that particular weekend, the Ferrari men would learn an uncomfortable truth. The Sting Ray was not just a toy, it was a threat. To see how that was even possible, you need to go back across the ocean to Detroit, a few years earlier, and walk through a very different kind of temple. Not a stone courtyard in Modena, but the vast styling studios and engineering labs of General Motors, where a quiet, relentless engineer named Zora Arkus-Duntov was waging his own private war. Duntov had been born in Europe and had seen real sports cars up close long before he ever set foot in America. To him, the early Corvettes were beautiful but shallow, all show and little substance. The kind of car that looked fast parked outside a diner but wilted when you asked too much from it. He wanted more. He wanted a machine that could walk into places like Le Mans or Monza, park right next to red Italian exotics, and say, without flinching, "Let us see who is faster." The turning point came with the second-generation Corvette, the car that would be known as the 1963 Sting Ray. On the surface, it was a styling revolution, with its razor-sharp fenders, hidden headlights, and that now legendary split rear window. But underneath, Duntov and his team had embedded something more important than style. They had given the Corvette a real racing soul. They shortened the wheelbase to make the car more agile, tightened the steering so that it responded with a quick, almost European precision, and built a new chassis that was stiffer and more serious. The old live rear axle remained, but the geometry was sharpened for better traction. For the first time, the Corvette felt like it wanted to attack corners instead of just blast down straight lines. Then came the secret weapons. Inside the option sheets that most customers never really understood, Duntov hid packages designed purely for racing. One of them had a simple code, a string of letters and numbers that meant nothing to the average buyer but everything to a racer. That package quietly transformed the Sting Ray from a fast street car into a track animal. It brought bigger brakes, heavier duty suspension pieces, a bigger fuel tank for endurance races, and a carefully massaged small block engine that could live at high revs for hours. On paper, the Corvette was still just a $4,000 American sports car. In practice, with the right options and the right hands at the wheel, it could run lap times that began to scrape at the pride of cars, costing 5 times as much. Back in Europe, rumors started to filter across the Atlantic. Stories of fiberglass coupes from America running shockingly quick times in sports car races, of a Detroit machine showing up at circuits that had long been the private playgrounds of Italian and British marquis, and leaving with silverware. At first, the old guard dismissed them. Magazine writers exaggerated. American tracks were not real circuits. The drivers exaggerated. But then, one day, a Sting Ray rolled into their world, into their paddock, onto their timing sheets, and suddenly, it was not a rumor anymore. Imagine the first practice session. The Ferrari prototype lines up at pit exit. Its 12-cylinder engine idles with a high, metallic chatter, the sound of precise machinery just waiting to be unleashed. The driver, in his open-faced helmet and dark goggles, pulls out onto the track, working the car up to temperature. A few minutes later, the Corvette thunders onto the circuit. Its V8 sound lower, rougher, like a drum beat compared to the Italian's high-pitched song. At first, the Ferrari is clearly quicker. It dances through the tight corners with grace, the long tail helping stability in fast bends. The Corvette looks heavier, more brutal, rolling a bit more, is nosediving under heavy braking. But as the laps go by and the drivers start pushing harder, the raw balance of engineering begins to appear. Under braking, the Sting Ray's big drums or optional discs bite hard and consistently. Through mid-speed corners, the wide American tires claw at the tarmac with unexpected tenacity. On the straights, the torque, rich small block explodes the car forward with a shove that feels endless. The stopwatch, as always, tells the story. Lap after lap, the times get posted on the board. The Ferrari prototype, beloved by its crew, sits on a respectable number. But the line next to the American car's number starts dipping lower. 1/10, then 3, then half a second, then nearly a full second faster. At first, the Ferrari mechanics laugh it off. Traffic. A lucky tow down the straight. The American driver taking ridiculous risks that will not last a full race distance. But then, the pattern holds. Different driver, different set of tires, different time of day. The fiberglass coupe is still quicker. Word gets back to Enzo. People like to talk about him as if he were a tyrant, a stone-faced patriarch who cared only about winning and maintaining control. In truth, he was also deeply human. He loved his drivers like sons, then sometimes sacrificed them to the relentless pursuit of speed. He revered his engineers when they delivered, then lashed them when they fell short, could be stubborn to the point of self-destruction. But he was not stupid. So when he hears that a cheap Chevrolet has just beaten the lap time of a hand-built Maranello prototype, he does not shout. He does not throw anything. He simply calls for the timing sheets. The papers arrive, still smudged with fingerprints and fuel stains. He scans them with narrowed eyes. There it is. Same track, same conditions, comparable traffic. Yet the American coupe is consistently faster. He notices the gap is not just on the long straight, where raw horsepower rules. The Corvette is gaining time in the twisty sections as well. That implies not just brute strength, but a competent chassis and serious brakes. It implies intent. He sets the papers down and asks a quiet question that makes the room suddenly colder. How much does that car cost? The answer comes back with a hint of disbelief. Around $4,000, depending on equipment. And this prototype, the engineer, hesitates. With development costs, the experimental bodywork, the custom engine tuning, the testing, it is not a question with a simple answer. But Enzo already knows. The rough figure in his mind is at least 5 times higher. $20,000 or more in mid-century money, poured into a jewel of a machine that, at that moment, is slower around a lap than an American car built in a factory by the tens of thousands. That is when the panic creeps in. Not the kind that makes a man scream, but the more dangerous kind. The quiet recognition that the world is shifting under your feet. Because if a mass-produced fiberglass coupe from across the ocean can match or beat the lap times of a hand-built Italian prototype, what does that say about the future of racing? What does it say about the value of the sacrifices made in Modena's workshops, of individual craftsmen beating aluminum panels with hammers, of mechanics torquing every nut by feel? What does it say about the legend of the Arte, prancing horse when the timing sheets show that an American shark is faster through the same corners? Out on track, the Corvette's driver is not thinking about any of that. He is just wrestling the wheel, feeling the car move under him, leaning on the tires until they start to talk back. The Sting Ray is no delicate instrument. It talks in simple, clear language. Turn in too early and the nose pushes wide. Get back on the power too soon and the rear steps out with a lazy, controllable slide. The brakes require a strong leg. The steering has weight, especially at speed, but it tells you honestly what is happening at the contact patches. Somewhere deep inside the car, the V8 is singing a different kind of song than the Italian 12. It is not as refined. It does not spin as absurdly high, but it makes wide, flat torque, the kind that slams you in the back out of every corner and keeps shoving until you are already thinking about the next breaking point. Paired with a chassis, tuned by someone who understood racing, not just styling, it becomes something dangerous, not elegant, but deadly effective. Back in Modena, Enzo's mind is running. He knows that pure speed is not the only reason people buy his cars. They buy them for romance, for history, for the idea that they are participating in something sacred. But he also knows that those myths are built on one core truth. His cars must be fast, faster than almost anything else. If that truth cracks even a little, the entire structure of the brand is at risk. And here is this American intruder, built for rich dentists and ambitious middle managers, showing up at serious circuits and quietly, methodically, dismantling lap records that used to belong only to hand-built European exotica. A $4,000 production coupe embarrassing a $20,000 prototype. Is it any wonder he panics? He absorbs the blow in his own way. Rather than admit that the Corvette represents a real structural threat to his kingdom, he files it away as a curiosity. A symbol of what can happen when a company with deep pockets and a huge industrial base decides to get serious about racing. He has already seen something similar with British rivals, and he will soon feel it far more painfully when a blue oval company decides to storm his sacred French endurance race. But in that earlier moment, the Sting Ray is the warning shot across the bow. What makes the story even more brutal is how ordinary the Corvette appears outside of that context. To most Americans, it is just the new model at the showroom, a sports car to be financed and parked in a suburban driveway. Most owners will never know that the shape of their car's nose came from a wild experimental racer that prowled American circuits years earlier, or that the suspension geometry was signed off by a man who had Le Mans victories burned into his memory. They will never know that hidden inside the option sheet are codes that, if selected, turn their fiberglass cruiser into something that can frighten Ferrari engineers on foreign soil. But the engineers know, the racers know, and Enzo, reading those timing sheets, understands just enough to see the outline of the threat. He had always believed that true sports cars were born of racing first and only later adapted for the road. His own creations followed that path, but the Corvette Sting Ray flipped the script in a way that must have been deeply unsettling. Here was a car created inside a giant corporation, designed to sell in large numbers, yet with a racing skeleton inside its friendly shape. Here was proof that Detroit, if it chose, could build not just loud, heavy cruisers, but genuinely sharp, capable sports machines. The panic, then, is not only about one cheap car beating one expensive prototype. It is about the fear that the old order is breaking, that a new age is coming, where precision no longer belongs only to small workshops and romantic, craftsmen, but also to vast assembly lines and industrial designers. An age where a customer can walk into a dealership, sign some papers, and drive out in a car that, with a few option boxes ticked, can run wheel to wheel with hand-built exotics on Sunday. Back at the track during the race itself, all the theories and fears turn into reality. The Ferrari leaves the grid with its usual authority, its engine's rising wail echoing off the grandstands. The Corvette launches a little more slowly, its rear tires fighting for traction, the live axle squirming as it tries to lay down the torque. For a few laps, the red prototype maintains a slim lead, its driver using every bit of his experience to stretch the gap. But as the stints go on, something starts to change. The American car's brakes, overbuilt for street use and further strengthened by racing options, stay consistent. The Ferrari's lighter, more delicate system requires more care as heat builds. On the straights, the Corvette's raw torque lets it claw back any time lost in the corners. On worn tires, both cars begin to slide more, and here the Sting Ray's forgiving nature gives its driver confidence to keep pushing, while the Italian pilot has to respect the narrow edge between grip and disaster. By mid-distance, the unthinkable happens. The $4,000 coupe draws alongside the $20,000 prototype at the end of the straight, both drivers braking as late as they dare. For a moment, they are door to door, the elegant Italian curve and the brutal American wedge occupying the same piece of track. Spectators lean forward, hardly believing what they see. Then, under braking, the Corvette holds its line just a fraction better. It turns in cleanly, the nose pointed, the rear planted. The Ferrari, a little lighter on its feet but also a little less stable on its worn tires, has to give a heartbeat earlier. At the apex, the Sting Ray edges ahead. Out of the corner, the V8 bellows, the rear tires squirm, and the American pulls away. In the pits, the Ferrari crew falls silent. Their $20,000 hero has just been passed, on merit, by a plastic-bodied American upstart. For the rest of the race, the Corvette stays there, either just ahead or trading positions, proving that its earlier lap times were no fluke. When the flag finally falls, the story is written. On that day, on that circuit, the cheap American coupe has matched or beaten the hand-built Italian prototype. Later, as the crowds thin and the track falls quiet, someone hands Enzo another photograph. This one shows the Corvette in front of his car, both machines streaking past a timing board that does not care about heritage, only about seconds and tenths. He studies it for a long moment. In that picture, you can almost see the future. The age when mass-produced sports cars would become so capable that they could threaten not just lap records, but the very identities of the brands that once ruled alone. The age when a Corvette, or a similar machine, could show up at a circuit anywhere in the world and force even the proudest racing teams to take notice. Enzo does what he always does when cornered. He doubles down. He pushes his engineers harder. He chases lighter materials, more power, more refined aerodynamics. He clings to the one thing he still believes he can always do better than anyone else, which is to build the purest, most emotional racing machines on Earth. But he never again makes the mistake of thinking that American cars are harmless. The panic he felt that day becomes fuel, a reminder that the world is bigger than Modena, and that respect, once lost on the track, is hard to win back. As for the Corvette Sting Ray, it goes home from that and other battles with something far more valuable than trophies. It carries the scars and stories that turn a car into a legend. The whispers that say, this was the car that made Enzo Ferrari look at the timing sheets twice. The myth that somewhere, sometime, a $4,000 fiberglass coupe from Detroit made a $20,000 Italian prototype sweat. Decades later, people will debate the exact numbers, the details, the specific circuits. They will argue about options and gearing and how much truth has been polished into legend. But the core of the story will always remain the same. Once upon a time, a company best known for chrome and tail fins built a car so capable that it crossed an ocean and shook the confidence of a man who thought he owned speed itself. If you stand today in front of a well-preserved 1963 Sting Ray, with its split rear window splitting the view, and you run your hand along that sharp fender line, you are not just touching fiberglass. You are touching the moment when the balance of fear shifted. When Ferrari, for the first time, had to seriously consider that a car built for $4,000 on an assembly line could chase, catch, and sometimes even beat a $20,000 hand-built prototype on neutral ground. And somewhere in that memory, Enzo Ferrari is still sitting at his desk, staring at that photograph, hearing the distant echo of an American V8, and realizing that the age of untouchable Italian dominance is over. The plastic car from across the sea has arrived, and it is faster than anyone in Modena ever wanted to believe.